Recently, there was a misunderstanding. That made things quite awkward in our home. My husband accused me of ignoring a call from his mother, but honestly, I didn't receive any call from her. This wasn't something new. My mother-in-law has always shown a strong preference for my husband, Walter, making me feel a bit left out. My husband insisted on me apologizing to her directly for the missed call, even suggesting it be done at their distant home. However, he quickly revealed with a grin that his mother would be visiting us soon and staying indefinitely. This news caught me off guard, so much so that I accidentally broke one of my favorite glasses. The thought of rearranging our home to accommodate her, particularly giving up my rarely used study, didn't sit well with me. Walter's insistence that everything be ready for his mother's arrival without any real explanation or discussion on the matter was frustrating. Since his father's passing, Walter's attachment to his mother seemed to grow stronger, sidelining our relationship. When he stubbornly suggested I didn't have a say in the matter since the house was inherited by him, I felt utterly disregarded. In a moment of defiance, I called a demolition company, planning to give Walter and his mother a shocking surprise by having the house demolished. Our relationship began quite romantically. We met at a corporate party where I was working for an event planning company, and he was an attendee. Our first interaction was him boldly asking to exchange contact information, which sparked an immediate connection between us. It was a whirlwind of emotions, leading to us eventually getting married. But now, facing these challenges, it's clear that love at first sight has its trials, especially when familial dynamics come into play. We ventured out for a meal, and despite my initial reservations about his reliability, Walter surprised me by asking me out. I agreed, delighted by the proposal. Despite being 2 years his senior, Walter had a youthful energy that made me feel completely at ease around him. Just 8 months into our relationship, we took the significant step of getting married. However, after our marriage, I noticed a stark change in Walter's behavior. One day, Walter mentioned that his mother wished to meet me. The news caught me off guard due to its suddenness, but given we had a day off the following day, it seemed like an opportune time. I've always found my mother-in-law to be somewhat challenging, a sentiment that was solidified during our initial meeting before our marriage. Upon arriving at Walter's parental home, his mother scrutinized me thoroughly, making me feel quite uncomfortable. During our marriage introduction, Walter was noticeably quieter, especially in the presence of his father, who played a dominant role in the family dynamics. It was revealed to me that Walter had always been overly dependent on his mother, a side of him I was unfamiliar with. My interest in learning more about Walter's childhood led to engaging in conversations with my father-in-law, much to the displeasure of my mother-in-law. Despite the initial tensions, our marriage received approval, largely thanks to my father-in-law's endorsement. This resulted in us spending the night at their place, where I bonded further with my father-in-law over drinks. Through these conversations, I gained insight into Walter's lack of confidence and his father's attempts to address it. My father-in-law expressed his hopes that I would take good care of Walter, marking the beginning of an improvement in our relationship. However, the evening took a turn when I realized Walter had vanished, and his mother was nowhere to be seen either. Unbeknownst to me at the time, this disappearance hinted at Walter's deep-seated issues. My father-in-law eventually succumbed to the effects of the alcohol, while I was left to face the stern criticism of my mother-in-law, who made it clear that I was to adhere to her guidance and take special care of the sensitive Walter. The next morning, the expectation for me to step up in my mother-in-law's absence was made clear. It was then I decided to confront Walter about whether he was indeed a mama's boy, a question that seemed to unsettle him. He dismissed the notion, suggesting I was overthinking his father's comments. Yet, I couldn't shake off my concerns, especially after an incident that exposed the complex dynamics of Walter's family. We were called to visit Walter's parents' house unexpectedly, an invitation that had never occurred since our marriage. This prompted me to suspect that something significant was underway, especially considering the warm reception Walter received from his mother upon our arrival, a warmth that was notably absent from me. The visit underscored the unique and challenging relationship dynamics within Walter's family, revealing deeper layers to our marital and familial interactions. I found myself puzzled about my presence at Walter's family home when I noticed my father-in-law was missing. On inquiry, I learned he was likely at the hospital, which seemed to barely concern my mother-in-law. Her indifferent response puzzled me further, and when I sought Walter's support, he seemed more interested in the cake his mother had made than in the family situation. Then came an unexpected request. Walter and his mother planned to go out, leaving me to watch the house. This was explained as a favor to my father-in-law, who would worry if the house were left unattended. Despite my reluctance, they left, assuming I'd find ways to entertain myself. Feeling abandoned and with no particular desire to do anything, I awaited their return. When my father-in-law finally came home, he was surprised to find them gone, especially since he hadn't been informed of their visit and had planned a hospital visit that day. His speculation that my mother-in-law might have intentionally planned this during his absence struck me as alarming. He suggested we exchange contact information to stay connected in case of future incidents, a proposal I welcomed amidst the growing concern for our family dynamics. Our wait for Walter and his mother's return was in vain. After receiving a late call from Walter, informing me they had decided to stay overnight at another house and implying I shouldn't bother returning, I was left astonished and hurt. Their blatant disregard for my feelings and the lack of communication was unsettling. Determined to address the issue head-on, I embarked on a journey back to our main house despite the late hour and the exhaustion from the travel. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by the sound of their laughter, a stark contrast to my frustration and fatigue. Resolute to confront them, I approached, ready to express my discontent and seek explanations for their actions and the underlying disregard they seemed to have towards me. Upon seeing Walter and his mother nonchalantly in the house, my frustration boiled over. "What are you two doing here, acting as if everything's normal while leaving father-in-law alone in such a state?" Their response was dismissive, implying that my concerns were overblown. Walter even suggested that, if I was unhappy, I could just leave. This struck a nerve, especially since the house we were in was one my late father had built with the remainder of his savings after my mother's passing. It was more than just a house to me. It was a legacy and a reminder of my father's love and hard work. Resolving to distance myself from the confrontation, I retreated to my study, a sanctuary where I indulged in my passion for jewelry making to find some peace. Time passed unnoticed until dawn broke, signaling a new day filled with the previous night's unresolved tensions. The next morning, my mother-in-law, as if nothing had happened, coldly hinted it was time for me to leave. After she left, the house was noticeably more peaceful, a stark contrast to the discomfort her presence brought. However, Walter approached me later with a grave expression, revealing that his father had taken a turn for the worse. Walter's request that I take care of his father, despite their recent neglect of him, was baffling. Nonetheless, I reached out to my father-in-law, who confided in me his deteriorating health and his final wish, a rather unconventional form of retribution against Walter and his mother for their indifference. Moved by my father-in-law's candidness and his plea for help, I committed myself to his cause, even going so far as to resign from my job to dedicate my time to him. Together, we schemed, plotting a course of action that would leave Walter and his mother with a lasting reminder of their neglect. Our plans were audacious, aimed at ensuring they would not benefit from his estate, a decision my father-in-law made after much contemplation. As days passed, I spent considerable time caring for my father-in-law, witnessing his health decline further. Despite this, his spirit remained strong, fueled by the knowledge that we had a plan in place. Walter occasionally inquired about his father's well-being, perhaps out of guilt or a belated sense of filial duty. I hoped this might spark a change in him, a desire to mend his ways and shoulder responsibility. Through this ordeal, my determination never wavered. I stood by my father-in-law's side, honoring his wishes and preparing for the eventual falut. It was a challenging path, one that required sacrifices, but I remained resolute, driven by a sense of justice and loyalty to a man who, in his final days, chose to confide in and rely on me. When my mother-in-law unexpectedly dropped by, claiming she was nearby, it disrupted our day. She seemed pleased to hear I would be cooking, expressing her anticipation for the meal. However, when she tasted the food I prepared, she dramatically spit it out, criticizing it harshly as terrible. Her reaction surprised me, as the food tasted normal to me. Yet, under her glaring judgment, Walter shifted his stance, echoing his mother's harsh words and suggesting that my caregiving for his father had distracted me from cooking properly. Feeling betrayed by Walter's quick alignment with his mother, I felt a deep sense of disappointment. Their decision to eat out, leaving me behind, underscored Walter's inability to support me against his mother's critiques. This incident shattered any hope I had for Walter's change. Upon Walter's return alone, I confronted him about his sudden change of opinion, influenced solely by his mother's mood. Realizing the futility of expecting appreciation or support from him, I declared that he would have to manage his meals if my cooking was so objectionable to him. This marked a turning point, reinforcing my dedication to caring for his father amidst our strained domestic atmosphere. In the following months, my father-in-law's health declined sharply. During a critical rush to the hospital, he confided in me about his will, a conversation cut short by his worsening condition. At the hospital, his life came to an end, leaving me in a state of shock and grief. Attempts to inform my mother-in-law were met with indifference, her callous response to his death, highlighting a chilling disregard for him. Neither Walter nor his mother visited the hospital, a clear indication of their feelings towards the man who had just passed away. Their absence during such a critical time was a stark revelation of their true characters, further distancing me from them emotionally. The subsequent funeral arrangements, minimal and driven by my mother-in-law's frugality, did little to honor my father-in-law's memory. This lackluster funeral only added to my growing resolve to reconsider my place in this family, contemplating divorce as a viable option to escape the toxic environment. In the end, the experience of losing my father-in-law not only exposed the depth of indifference within my husband and his mother, but also propelled me towards seeking a new path for myself, away from the negativity and lack of empathy that had come to define my married life. After the funeral, a deep sadness weighed on me, making every day feel heavier than the last. Amidst this gloom, I received a call from someone claiming to be a lawyer, reminding me of the last conversation I had with my father-in-law in the ambulance. Agreeing to meet, I visited the lawyer's office to hear the reading of my father-in-law's will. The will revealed unexpected details that I thought could serve as leverage against my husband and mother-in-law. Returning home, my husband confronted me, accusing me of ignoring a call from his mother, a claim I found baseless since I hadn't received any calls from her. This was just another instance of him siding with his mother, leaving me feeling more isolated. His announcement that his mother would be visiting soon only added to my frustration, especially when he suggested using my personal space to accommodate her. His insensitivity, coupled with my recent discovery of the will, left me feeling utterly disregarded. In a moment of clarity, I realized that conversations with my husband were futile. He was too preoccupied with pleasing his mother. Deciding to take control of the situation, I contacted a demolition company, misleading my husband into thinking I was organizing a sale of unwanted items. With him convinced to pick up his mother, I used the opportunity to make significant changes. I began by packing up my belongings and clearing out any of John's items that could be sold or recycled. After tidying up, I visited a real estate agent to find a new place to stay temporarily, considering the time it would take to settle the inheritance. I found a suitable room and signed the rental contract on the spot, ensuring I had somewhere to move to the next day. That night, I spent one last time in the house that my father had left me. It was a poignant farewell to a place filled with both cherished and painful memories. Despite the sadness of leaving, I was determined to start afresh, confident in the knowledge that I would one day build a new home on my terms. This decision was not just about finding a new place to live. It was about standing up for myself and setting the stage for a future where I could live independently, free from the shadows of those who had taken me for granted. After transitioning to my new home, I oversaw the demolition of the old house, a significant step in fulfilling both my sense of retribution and the wish of my late father-in-law. Not long after the demolition commenced, I received a frantic call from Walter and his mother, bewildered by the unfolding events and urgently demanding explanations. Upon meeting them at the demolition site, I was immediately confronted by Walter, incredulous at the sight of his childhood home being dismantled. I explained that this act was both a form of revenge and a fulfillment of his father's last wish, much to his dismay. My mother-in-law's anger flared, culminating in a failed attempt to physically assault me, a clear sign of her desperation and disbelief at our newfound homelessness. Amid their shock, I revealed the ace up my sleeve: my father-in-law's will. The document, legally notarized, transferred the rights of the family home to me, along with any remaining assets my father-in-law had. Their hopes of salvaging some financial benefit from the situation were dashed when they learned the remainder of the inheritance was a mere $32,000, leaving them with only $6,100 each after the division. A letter accompanying the will shed light on my father-in-law's foresight. He had donated the bulk of his wealth to charity, leaving only a small sum to be contested. My offer to distribute their share was met with silence, a clear indicator of their shock and disappointment. The situation escalated when my mother-in-law attempted another physical confrontation, only to fail miserably. As I walked away from the chaos, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of their predicament and the justice served by my father-in-law's meticulous planning. Back in my sanctuary, I wasted no time in preparing the divorce papers, keen on severing all ties with my past life. The process moved swiftly, and within 2 weeks the divorce was finalized, closing the chapter on a tumultuous period marked by greed and deception. My final act of closure involved clearing out the family home of my mother-in-law's belongings, asserting my legal ownership of the property in the face of their incredulity. Threats of police intervention finally drove them away, marking the end of our interactions. Rumors of their subsequent life in a modest apartment, plagued by constant bickering, only confirmed my decision to distance myself from such toxicity. As for me, the decision to rent rather than inhabit the family home was motivated by a desire to honor my father-in-law's memory and to start anew, unburdened by the shadows of a troubled past. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, one focused on self-renewal and moving forward independently.